Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this special episode of the Jason's Take On. I'm Jason Whitehead, and here with my co-host, Jason Noble in the UK. And we're really excited today to have a special guest, Mona Yoast, who is the VP of Educator Success at Learning Ally. Full disclosure, Learning Ally is a client of Tritons, and I'm really honored to have had the opportunity to work with Mona and her team to do some great work with them, helping to build out some of their processes and playbooks and trainings, and really excited about it. And just really was so excited about Mona's energy and the approach that she's taking. Couldn't wait to have her as a guest. So Mona, thank you so much for joining us. You know, one of the things that we're going to share is Learning Ally is in a really unique industry and a unique space. So I think people will really get a lot out of this discussion. And Mona's also taken a really fun approach, an interesting and powerful approach to helping to build up her team. And as you know, with the Jason's Take On, we're all about how can people be bold in customer success and try something new and try something courageous. And I was really excited with what Mona's been doing. So she's really going to talk to us today around the theme of upping your CS game and really what that looks like. So Mona, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. So before we go in, Mona, can you just go in and tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background, and also a little bit about Learning Ally and some unique things, given your industry and your focus that you guys face that a lot of our other listeners who are in the software space may not face as well.
Sure, yeah. So I was a reading specialist by trade. I worked in elementary schools and middle schools helping struggling readers. And I got really involved in probably, gosh, this is going back 20 years ago, so I'm dating myself. We were implementing a new reading program that we thought was going to have great success with our kids. And I worked really hard with my teachers, providing them training and support and everything that they needed to really implement successfully. And the sales rep that I had developed a relationship with said, hey, Mona, what you're doing in your district to make sure that your teachers are being successful implementing this, I've got 3 customers over here that could really use somebody to do that for them too. And that's when I started, that's how I got into customer success and really working on how do you get implementations going well? How do you get people willing to accept a new way of doing things and get out of their comfort zone a little bit? So I've been dabbling in that. And then in the education world, we've gotten more and more into the digital world, into the SaaS world. So all of that came right along with me to where I am now at Learning Ally. So I've been here for 10 months. And in this role, we at Learning Ally, so just to give you a little background, Learning Ally started in 1948 called Recordings for the Blind. So it was just books on tape. So people with disabilities could still access books for fun, books for learning. In 1995, we renamed ourselves to Recordings for the Blind and Dyslexic, getting into the dyslexic space, and then rebranded ourselves completely in 2011 into Learning Ally, where our customer focus shifted mostly from households B2C to selling into school districts more like B2B. So it was quite a shift for Learning Ally, and they really had to up their game, if you will, on how to sell into a new market. And customer success is relatively new for them. They had more of a traditional account management kind of a model, but they knew the thing about Learning Ally is that sure, we want to grow our business, but because we are nonprofit mission based, it is equally important to us to grow our reach so that we're impacting our learners. And we know we are not going to have a chance to do that if we don't have our customers first being successful implementing the product. So that's why they really chose to take this focus.
I love the way that you've kind of, sorry, Jess, I love the way you've kind of introed that, Mona, and you kind of said a lot of things there that resonated with the kind of podcast that we did earlier today about domain expertise versus CS expertise. And you coming in because this guy said, we need someone to make our customers successful is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I really love that you've brought in this kind of breadth of experience that can really allow your customers now to drive something different and really focus and be them successful. Jace, you were going to say something, sorry.
Yeah, and what I really enjoy that I think is so unique about Learning Ally too is that, as you mentioned, you are a non-for-profit and you're so mission-driven on how do we impact students' lives, how do we impact learners' lives, and to recognize that it's not about churn, it's not about keeping people over, it's really about that impact on students and making a difference. And I think a lot of people, especially in the for-profit world, tend to lose sight of the mission and the impact on everyday people, and it's so exciting and it's such an honor for me to work with your group because of that. So I just really want to share how much I enjoy that aspect of it. I think it's very unique as well from the success perspective.
Not that we don't focus on churn. We absolutely do.
True. True, but for the sake of having the massive impact on students.
Absolutely.
Very, very
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the same principles though, isn't it? So you might, churn is still important. So it's kind of lifetime value. All these good things are still there, but it's the whole philosophical way of doing it is still the same. You said earlier on that you'd only been with Learning Ally about 10 months. What was the situation like when you joined there in terms of educator or customer success? What was kind of your main vision and mission when you came in and took on board the responsibility and team?
I really disciplined myself to not come in with a vision right away, to really be a learner first, because what I did at my previous company, you can't just cookie cutter on top of it. And I think that's really important because every industry, even in ed tech, the way our programs are, how technical they are, how specific they are, they're really different the way you need to implement and the way you need to support those customers, although there are definitely customer success ideals and best practices that really apply anywhere. So my approach, the very first thing I did is map the customer life cycle. And everybody says that, that's one of the most important things you need to do in customer success is make sure you map the customer life cycle. But I really did it deeply, and I didn't rush through it. And the interesting thing was I had an account management team that at the time reported into finance within the organization. And then we had an engagement management team that reported somewhere else, and then an engagement specialist team that reported somewhere else. So it was really fragmented, but by doing this whole customer lifecycle map, we had each of those teams map it out, and we were really able to see where do we have gaps, where do we have overlaps, where we were literally stepping on each other's toes, going in and working at different levels of the customer. So it was really important to get that picture and get it down really well to know what approach we should take. But from there, when you kind of say, this is the process the way it is today, and this is where we touch the customers along their journey, where were there opportunities to celebrate successes that were already there? Because don't get me wrong, there were some really great pockets of goodness that we wanted to make sure were amplified. But then we also saw some really large gaps. The biggest one being because these 3 different teams touching different customers at different times, reporting into different areas, there was no one Learning Ally methodology for customer success. Each team was doing their own things. They weren't communicating and sharing best practices with one another. So that was a big part of the approach once we kind of mapped that out, that we need to bring this together. We need to be one team. We need to be working from one set of best practices, obviously differentiated for our different customer segments, but we need to be a team. So that was a big part of the transition of pulling these different things together as one cohesive customer success team.
Yep. No, that's so great that you did that. And, I love the approach of we came in and mapped this all out. As you were doing that, because, you and I have talked about this too, there's a lot of stuff that you're doing fast initially to really get this transition happen quickly, but you also have a longer term vision. Other than the one team, what were some of the things like, we've got to get this done first? How did you identify what needs to come in first versus what are the things that can come a little bit later, and the approach to that long-term effort?
We've segmented it into looking at 3 different areas. So we have to look at the process, and going through that mapping, I started visualizing what I wanted the longer term vision to be, but the process only exists with the people. So we looked at people first, or process first, then people. Do we have the right people that have the skill set to carry out an uplifted process? And then we disciplined ourselves to save technology third. If we've got the process right, the people right, then we can figure out what the tech tools are going to be before we go forward. So the priority then became, do we have the right people? And we took a difficult approach where we knew in some cases we probably did not, but we didn't want to jump to any conclusions. I certainly did not having been here long enough. So we launched into a whole talent assessment process to make sure we had the right people. And it was quite intense. So basically everyone was told the role as you know it of account manager or engagement specialist, they are going away, and we are creating new true customer success roles. And Jason Noble, I loved what you said on the session this morning, that you can't just say, okay, we're wiping all of the history out and we're moving forward and we're creating these roles. So, all right, now you're going to be called this, and then nothing changes. So the most important thing to me was that whatever we do, it is abundantly clear that this isn't just, oh, we're just renaming the team to, be cool. We'll say we're customer success now. We really are changing and revamping the role. And we knew not everybody was going to bring what they needed as far as experience, as far as the skill set to be successful. So I took what I consider the 3 hallmarks that you've got to nail to be successful in this. And that's really doing great planning and onboarding, delivering training, because on my teams, we also deliver the training and for the end user to make sure they understand it. And then really, really good data monitoring, in that you can have strategic conversations with customers to really get them see, this is where you are, this is where you still need to go, let's map a course for you to get there. So we created simulations, and I created a rubric around each one of those 3 key hallmarks of our customer success model. And everyone had to role play. They were evaluated on these rubrics. And if they really weren't bringing the essential skills to the table, not everybody made it to the team. So that was difficult and painful, probably some sleepless nights, as I'm sure you can imagine. But those that were coming forward with us knew that they earned their spot here, and that they practically interviewed for the job and got the job. They weren't just given the role. So really that next focus was really making sure you've got the right people. So that also opened up some space for us to recruit from outside a little bit as well. So you've got people that now, a team where we've got some people we brought in with lots of great experience in customer success management, and some that are still novice to it. So education of the team going forward was really critical. And that's how we ended up working with Tritons, because we knew we needed to even the playing field for everyone and invest in their education and their ongoing growth. So everything from everybody went through the same online course. So we used the Tritons online course, so everybody got their basic certification level of customer success management. So now we're all talking the same language. We're all talking the same best practices. Then we worked with Jason to build our Learning Ally specific playbook. There was no playbook. There was nothing documented as far as what best practices we should be using. And we made it clear that we were raising the expectation. If we didn't document what those expectations were and what good performance looks like, we would have still been flying a little bit blind. So in investing in those 2 things, and now even the rubrics that we created as part of that performance assessment process are now used for ongoing and coaching and feedback for the team as they're getting more and more confident with these new practices that we taught them.
How did you find that kind of period of change when you're taking from the team where it was, you're asking people to kind of reassess their whole purpose in the organization, getting them to apply? That's a really challenging point to go through. And we briefly touched on it earlier today, Jason, but not at this level of detail. But what were some of the real big organizational level challenges that you saw doing that, Mona, and kind of what are some of the learnings that you have from that you could share with people?
I actually resisted at first, I will admit, this really being bold. And you kind of said earlier, Jason, because I heard you kind of make a little reference to the session this morning, basically telling everybody the jobs as you know them are no longer exist. This is, you're welcome to apply for these new jobs, but it was made that clear that as of this date, you may not be moving forward, at least as a part of the customer success team, not necessarily not with Learning Ally, but as a part of the customer success team. So that was really, really hard. So imagine the level of stress and anxiety that brings the team. I resisted doing that. And I'm really glad that I trusted my HR partner to counsel me well, to make sure we were doing it with full transparency. That was critically important, because everybody knew that everything that had been communicated with them was communicated with them. team. They knew exactly what the process was going to be. There was total transparency. It made it a little more stressful, but looking back, I wouldn't do it any other way, because that's what's the fairest and most honest and transparent with the team. In other situations, I think that could have been, you would always expect when you're going through those instances of change, and I've seen it in other organizations that I've been through as well, you definitely see productivity go down. You see engagement go down. That's just given, it's human nature. But I gotta say, with this organization, what impressed me so much is because there is such a passion for our cause that nobody let a customer fall through the cracks during that time. It was amazing to see.
That's absolutely huge. And one of the things you said that I really appreciated too is the people who stayed and got the new positions really felt they earned it. And I've worked with many organizations where there's been a lot of, at the frontline level, like everyone knows this person's not performing and management doesn't do anything about it. So they lose respect for management, and they have a lot of bad feelings towards their coworker, and recognizing that, everyone had the same shot that I did, but I earned this position, and the people that will be coming in will earn it as well too. I think that's really huge.
Yeah. And the one other thing I would add that I think is what brought us past this difficult spot and the change so quickly, because I feel like we are in such a good place now, is that we said we are going to invest in you. You don't need to be perfect for this new role for you to have a place in this team. We're going to make the investment in you, and the training that we provided, putting that, I know it's kind of old school, but we were so proud to put the new playbook in their hands in a binder. And it wasn't that it needed to, but they needed that tactile, this is what's different. This is how your job is different. And we spent a week going through it and marking it up and highlighting and tabbing and all of those kinds of things. And they left our summer meeting so jazzed and pumped. They felt like they felt they were a part of something bigger than they were just 6 months ago. So huge success story. And I just have to give all the credit to the teams for hanging in there through it, because when they made it to the other side of the change, they realized, wow, we really are more empowered. We've got the company's backing and support to be successful, because that's all they really want for us, is for us to be successful so our customers can be successful.
I think it's something that I've seen these changes in a number of organizations, and I think you do, as someone that's worked in customer success, I always talk about the triangle of customers, and you've got your customers that pay your bill, your stakeholders, but your team. And to say part of my role is to make my team successful, it's a really deep thing, and I think it really has big meaning with changes like this. So you're not doing it for selfish reasons, you're trying to do it, and sometimes when people have to exit a business, you're doing it for their benefit as well. And at the time they might not see it, and a lot of particularly startup organizations now, when you go through these big changes, they can be very painful, really right down to the core of people, because they've never seen it before. But it's knowing that it's doing it for the right reason and trying to still see that bigger picture. And I really like that, the way you've talked through it there.
Yeah. So Mona, one of the other things that often comes with these transitions is, what did you need to do internally when you first got there, and what do you need to continue to do to get the support of the other executives in Learning Ally and the other department leads about the changes you're making? And what did you need to do to get the support of, we don't have the right team, we've got to transition this to deliver on our mission here?
Yeah, that's will be an ongoing thing. So, I mean, part of it came started during the interview process. When I was considering taking this role, is like really feeling that, not to say that I was interviewing Learning Ally as much as they were interviewing me, but I wasn't going to come into this role if I didn't, because everything that I have read or learned from the beginning of, customer success as we know it today, is that if you don't have the executive buy-in on down, and that it is seen as not a department, but as the philosophy of how your company operates, that it's not going to be successful. It's not going to have the should. So I felt pretty good that I had the support there, but then we've really worked, those of us that were on board with that, to infiltrate into other levels of the organization and make sure we're communicating it well. So one of the things that we tried as far as a communication plan around this change is instead of us just sending out an announcement, oh, here's what's happening, we're creating, we're pulling these teams together and we're going to create an educator success department within the company, and we're going to take this philosophy. I had a lot of like drip campaign education that happened leading up to the change to get people on board and comfortable with the ideas and the concepts. But when it was time to announce the change that was happening, we actually used the department leaders of all of the other departments within the company. Instead of me just sending out a blanket email, I created a deck for them and delivered it to them, and their charge was to go back and deliver it to their orgs within, you know, their departments within the organization, and then filter back any questions so that everybody was getting the message. And then we trained them in how to have the conversation. What does this mean for us as our department? So what does customer success mean for marketing and how we contribute to that cause? What does customer success mean for production and how we contribute to that cause? So it's still we're still very nascent with, you know, really translating the concepts across the org. I just started socializing a great checklist I found of how to know and what to look for, that customer success is really a part of your organization's culture and not just a segment within the company. So I just started like floating that around and going to try to use that as an anchor to make sure we're continuing to push that, because it is still relatively new. It is not baked into the culture yet, but it is our goal to get it there.
You'll have to share that with us. I'd love to see that kind of
oh, I'd be happy to.
checklist. That'd be brilliant, because I think it's something that it is. That there's a lot of talk when you look at kind of the thought leaders around customer success. And Jason and I have talked about this before. I really don't think it makes sense as a separate department. You know, everybody in the whole business is there to make customers successful. It's a horizontal focus, and you need your customer success people. I see them really as your facilitators to make sure everyone's working that same direction to be more customer centric. And I love that checklist is such a great idea to help kind of share best ideas of doing it. And you talked through the idea earlier on of kind of building a lot of focus on processes, on the kind of tools and the people and the playbook. Were there any other big changes that you looked at doing in terms of processes? I like your approach where it was people, process, or process, people, and then tech. But what were some of the big changes you did around other processes there? And are there any things?
You know, a good example that we feel really good about because it went really well is when we mapped out the process, we realized right away, like eye-opening, we had no sales handoff process. It was haphazard as best. The sales teams and what was account management and engagement really didn't talk much about customers there. So there was a really big void to fill. But when we look at it through that lens of people, process, and technology, first we have to make sure we need to create an environment where our salespeople and our educator success team see ourselves as one team that advocates for our customers and our customers' goals and needs. So we had a very successful summer meeting this year. Typically they would bring the two teams into the same office under the same roof for the entire week, and they never set foot in the same room. Whereas this year we had a very integrated agenda with the goal of building those relationships, because they have to be willing to talk to one another and work for one another, because that's that's how we show up for our customers. They need a relationship with both of us, and it needs to be a really good tag team type of a relationship. So then that was the people part of it. The process, well, we had to build, people aren't doing it because we haven't laid out what should the process be. So we actually had to reach backward into our sales process to say, give them very specifics. You need to be asking these questions. And for this implementation to get off the ground successfully, you need to have done these things with the customer. You need to have really clearly identified what is it that you want to achieve through this implementation. What typically has worked well for you in the past, those types of things that we really need to know. And so then we built the process of the tools that they were going to expose them to, what they need to share with them about what implementation should look like so they know what to expect. So we built those parts of the process, and then used the technology. We actually built a page right within our CRM on the customer record that has those fields that the sales reps need to input. So we know what their bare minimum, we know why are they adopting Learning Ally, what's the problem they're trying to solve, or a goal or an outcome that they're looking for. So at least we have some foothold into the conversation when we reach out to start the planning and onboarding process. And the beauty of it is that not only is it baked into the technology as well, but it's actually made a requirement in the sales. As the sales is working the opportunity can't move past, I think we decided 50% or 80% or something like that until those fields are filled in. So we've got to guarantee that we're going to get at least some good information in that sales handoff process, even if the people involved were not able to get together and have that conversation.
Wow, that's great. And I think, especially for low touch type customers where you have that, you won't always have a big handoff. You won't always have those big meetings, having a venue to capture that. You touched on a couple of things with that, and also came up in the session this morning as well too. And you mentioned how important it is to build relationships even within your teams and looking for different folks. When you were looking to hire the teams that you have now, what were the key attributes that you were looking for? And were you primarily concerned about customer success expertise or the ability to get there? Or were you more looking for the domain expertise in the education space?
Yeah, interesting, because of the history of how Learning Ally really just since 2011 really started getting into the education space versus the household space. They were looking at themselves and realizing we don't have enough educators within this organization to really understand how to address this market. So they were actively and heavily recruiting educators because they realized they had a gap there. But then look at the way the customer success, the methodology, what they were doing for customer engagement and account management didn't really evolve, because we were lacking that sort of outside expertise as well. So interesting, of all of the talent that we evaluated, some of the ones that came to us with the education background did not have the other attributes we were looking for, like proactive, results driven, that relationship building, that customer success drive. So it was kind of eye-opening that, so what we know we're looking for now is somebody that has extensive experience, if at all possible, in driving implementations in educational settings, educational technology. Many of them, it just so happens that they do also, from earlier on in their career, have some form of educational expertise, but we are finding that that's not necessarily what's making them successful in the role. It's that they bring that. There's the experience in really understand how to work school systems, how to work those relationships, how to network and those types of things. The education experience certainly helps. Our members of the team that don't have the education experience, they feel a handicap there. So I love that one of you mentioned this morning that the idea of, why don't we get a blended team and we have some of each and then learn from each other and support one another where we can. And that seems to be our sweet spot that we have found.
I like that blended team approach is a very, very clever idea. And that I think is absolutely a be bold thing. It's almost like having a customer success spy in different parts of the organization, for want of a better word, but someone who's, and it's actually it's like a customer champion across the business. So you've got someone who's allied to that way of thinking, that philosophical approach that we talked about, but somebody that really has that focus on the customer that is in every single department. You can almost have like another virtual team that get together. I really, really like the sound of that. That's a very, very clever idea.
Yeah.
What are your... Sorry, go on, Mona. No, go on.
No, I was just going, one of the things that we realized we were lacking is that that little bit of hunger, I guess, that drive that we found those that had just come out of the education space. They had the bleeding hearts and wanted to help educators, but they kind of went more into a role of, I'm kind of that suggestive, I'm your engagement person, I'm here to help you, give me a call if there's anything that I can do to support you. And it ended up being much more reactive and, I'm here to help if you want to reach out to me, instead of really being proactive. And we know to drive strong customer success, you've got to be extremely proactive. So that to me is like a huge deal breaker, that you've got to have. Some people have that bone and some people don't, and we need people that have that bone.
I wonder if that hunger also came from that structural change, going through who are the right people. You want people to want to be there, so you're kind of creating that kind of a vacuum that then pulls people in. So you've got the right people, but you want people to also push yourself and change it. So that although a painful process to go through, you can see the added benefits that come out the other side of it.
Yeah, you can see who really wanted it. And as part of the interview process, I had to ask point blank of, there's our structure before had team accountability with very, very loose goals, not overly met.
Yep.
We're striving to be metrics driven, but the metrics were maybe a little murky and hard to really pinpoint. And I said, we're moving to a world where you are going to have your own book of business.
Yep.
And you're going to be individually accountable for a renewal number. And I know that there's a debate across the CS world of, do our CSMs own the renewal number? Some they don't. To create that sense of urgency that was lacking, we decided to go that route. And, I told them, some people are really, really comfortable and thrive in that environment, and some people don't. So you need to come into this with eyes wide open if this is a role you really want. That, if that's not what motivates you and what makes you thrive, maybe this isn't the best role for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things I like that you had put into the playbook as well too is you gave people tools and tips and processes, but you also let people know what your performance expectations for them, and and reinforce that all the way through. That and the rubric that you mentioned. I think just that constant reinforcement of I'm setting you up for success by telling you what's expected and what it takes to be successful. And so many organizations, I think, skip that critical step. Mona, shifting gears here, you've done a lot in just the short 10 months that you've been there, but I know you also have a lot more that you want to do. What's sort of next on your trajectory, and what are sort of the big things you see coming up for you?
The Be Bold challenges for the next period.
Yeah, so two things that are really heavy going into, this is back to school for us. Mm-hmm. So this is our heavy time. So it's kind of like, it's one of those things where, you taught the kids all you could about being the best at what they can be, and then you go to college and you just have to hope they learned all they could, and you'll see them at winter break and parenting.
Doesn't always work, does it?
But the teams are jazzed and they are ready to go. So while they're into that, we've got to go back to, I kind of said we put the technology piece on the back burner. So really going to be my job with our data scientists here on staff is going to be really looking at what are we going to call our health score. We have a version of a health score right now, but we know it could be a little more dynamic. It could be a little more real time. So that's a big thing that we have to chip away at. And the other is we are just moving into the space where the service our customer success team provides includes that initial onboarding training, but to really get deeper, more deeply ingrained implementations that are going to reach more kids. We know we need to teach teachers to use our audiobook solution in different ways within their instruction. So we're ingrained. From a customer success standpoint, I would call that even more sticky. But from our mission side of knowing that we'll reach more kids if teachers know how to use this better. So we're launching the market professional learning modules. So really a professional service that we can upsell. And it's going to be making sure the teams are comfortable now being able to have that conversation with a customer in the data reviews that we call them data reviews or success checks. I know in the rest of the CS world, a lot of times it's QBRs. But we're really looking at educational outcomes, not necessarily business outcomes. But when we're in those conversations, we're looking at the data and saying, wow, I can see you're using Learning Ally in this way. But if we look at our maturity continuum or whatever we will call it, teachers could be doing this, this, and this. And I want that light bulb to go on in the customer to say, wow, I didn't even realize we could be using Learning Ally that way. Could you show me how to do that? And to have them come into that and say, yes, we absolutely can. We have these beautiful professional learning modules. So we're getting them right into the upsell conversation. in just a beautiful, elegant way that's just around where the customer sees they want to go. That's because we painted that picture for them of what else could be possible if they made a little more investment in their staff to learn how to use it in bigger and better ways.
I love the way that you talked about kind of renaming the QBR. I'm not told Jason before, I don't like the terminology because we're not reviewing their business.
Right.
You shouldn't do it because I've used customer value review or something before, but I
like
love the way
too.
you're doing it.
Yeah.
But it's about what are you doing for the customers, and I love how you've got that full engagement there. But Mona, we're coming up on time fast, but can I just say a massive thank you. This has been a really fantastic conversation, and we really appreciate you sharing all of your experience. And I'd love to do another conversation further down the line with you. With all the changes that you've made and kind of what you've done to date and the great success, what's kind of your biggest aha moment, the biggest eye opener that you said, right, this is what I know I should have done? What's really been that big moment for you? And what are the recommendations you can give other people?
Well, one is definitely move with urgency, but not too quickly. Like I said, if I had come in and said, I didn't want to be the new person that came in like, oh, she's just coming in and doing this because that's what she did before and that's what she knows how to do. Yep. But finding that right balance of coming in with an open mind, but you can't wait too long either. Not you get a little, in other implementation contexts, sometimes we've called it go native. That you still need fresh enough eyes that you don't go native and become too sympathetic with the challenges that have caused them to be operating the way they are. Like you got to be able to push through it too, even though. So it's like, don't move too fast because you have to have really done your due diligence. But then once you've really locked in on this is the way we need to go, then move swiftly.
I like that because it's kind of like about vision, ideas, but then it's about successful execution as well.
Yeah, and I need to figure out how I make sure that going forward I don't go native, so that we're always make sure, like if you guys have any advice, how do you make sure you're always taking that critical stance and still looking at things with a fresh eye? So even though we know we've achieved this, let's not get complacent. How are we going to keep getting better and better at what we're doing?
One of the things that I think, sorry, Jason, one of the things that I think that we've got in customer success that I think is unique to us is that you've got that ability to go in as detailed as you need, but then to also to step back, and because customer success is changing all the time, and you're sharing things here that are new to me that I'm going to start making notes here. This is brilliant, but this is, I think it's an industry like no other, where you see things changing all the time, and it's just being able to do that, and I absolutely love that. And I think the fact that you can reassess every period, you kind of take that step back and ask your customers, how are you doing? What are we driving value? You understand how you're getting there.
And I love your thoughts on how do you make sure that you're not going native as a CS leader, because I think a lot of folks don't stop and ask themselves that. And I know I've been on long-term multi-year projects with clients. Like I've been here too long. I've lost that objectivity that they need, and it's time to refresh and re-energize the team. But I think a lot of CS leaders would serve themselves well by asking, have I gone native, and what can I do about it to reshift or move on? So that is absolutely a wonderful question. So I think that's probably a great place to leave it there. Mona, thank you so much for joining us. I know I've enjoyed this conversation immensely, and I agree with Jason. Would love to have you come back in a couple of months to hear how things have progressed and all the great things that you're doing, and any new things that you've learned from what you have coming down the pipe. So you're doing some really exciting things. I think a lot of people will get a lot out of this conversation. So thank you so much. Really excited to have you here. And for anyone who wants to get in touch with Mona, you can reach her on LinkedIn with Mona Yoast, or contact me, and I will connect you via LinkedIn to her. She's really just a dynamic leader and a great customer success professional. I'm very lucky to have her here on the show today. So thank you very much, Mona.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Mona. Fantastic. As Jason said, I think the great thing as well is you're a huge advocate for all the challenges that we're going. And great to join, great to have the conversation, and thank you for joining the other podcast with us.